Hey mom, how's it going?
I'm having a good day, Lindsay. How's your day going?
I'm doing good. I'm wrapping up a couple projects and I'm taking a long weekend next weekend. So headed to Asheville for the weekend, which will be beautiful and a little bit chilly, but that's okay.
That is one of my favorite places to visit. I love Asheville. It's gorgeous. So I'm sure you'll have a good time.
Yeah, we're gonna do some hiking, some brewery hopping, all those fun things. So I'm really excited, but super also excited today to bring on someone who's been a good friend of both of ours, but also pretty instrumental in helping this podcast even come to be. So, welcome to the podcast today, Daniel. How's it going?
Great. Thank you both for having me. I love Asheville as well. So make sure you
Yeah,
see the Tom Selleck mural. That's at
the
Burial
Tom's.
Brewing.
Okay, wait, I need to write it
It's
down.
really
Tom
funny.
Selleck
Yeah.
mural. Okay.
Where is it, Daniel?
It's at Burial Brewing in Asheville, just downtown on what they call the Slope. And they've got a mural of Tom Selleck and the Goonies thing.
That's awesome. I
That's
don't know that
cool.
I've ever actually seen that. We did a brewery tour when we were there for a North Carolina event, and we actually sponsored a brewery tour. I bet you I was right there, but I was so focused on making sure that people got to the breweries that I forgot to be a tourist myself.
Nice. Yeah. Talking about EBITDA and not looking at murals at the
Yeah,
brewery.
exactly. I'm sure I was talking about EBITDA. And then I'm wondering why I'm losing agents that they don't want to hang out with me. Anyway, well,
Funny.
Daniel, I would love to, for people who don't know you, obviously you are one of the co-founders of Market Retrievers. I think you're the CMO. Is that the
That's
technical
right.
title that you have? Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people that don't know your background, give me a little 30,000 foot. How are you even in insurance and what is Market Retrievers?
Sure, absolutely. So, about 17 years ago, I think that's coming up in March, I got into the industry at the trade association level. So, I worked for the Tennessee Association, was their director of marketing. Didn't know anything about it really at the time, but had a marketing position open up, had a connection that asked me to submit a resume, interviewed and said, "Hey, I can give this a shot. How do you market insurance agents? But I'll give it a shot." So, kind of developed from there. I got involved with a lot of the partner program there, met a lot of great agents and industry folks, just developed it into kind of a chief marketing officer role there. And then about 3 years ago, just decided to make a change. And Abby Wheeler, who was on the staff with me at Insurers of Tennessee, she and I were talking about both making a change and we were looking at other opportunities. And I wanted to stay in insurance. So I had so many contacts that I really enjoyed working with. We said, could we do this in an insurance role on our own? So we talked about it. We said, hey, a lot of agents aren't great with marketing. There's a lot of opportunities there probably. So we set out and kind of did our own thing. So we do digital marketing, a lot of content, a lot of social media, a lot of Google and SEO for agencies across the country, as well as other trade associations from the Big I and other states, and some carriers and some great vendor partners like you guys, of course. But yeah, we've been very lucky that it's grown this quick.
Yeah, we have that in common that we both started at the trade association level. I think a lot of good talent. Actually, all three of us do. I don't know
I
why I
know.
just excluded you from the equation right here, mom. But I think there's a lot of cool people who come out of starting at a trade association. It really gives you a good opportunity to build your network and work with a lot of really, really cool agents. I'd love to just start off and talk about, marketing is complicated, super complicated. I've only worked in like the marketing sphere for a couple years and you've got a lot under your belt. And there's just so much information out there, especially if you're an agency owner, you're focused on growing a business, you're focused on selling. What do you think? What are the key things that agencies should take into consideration when starting to even put marketing into their thought process for their agency?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lindsay. I think you start with your target audience, right? I mean, who are you trying to reach? What are they interested in? How can you help tell a story to them that will resonate? And the way we kind of explain that to agency owners and principals is you talk about being in the relationship business. Social media and digital marketing is a lot about relationships. So, how can you enhance the relationships you have in person online? You talk about what you do as an agency. You talk about the community. You talk about the people on your team and the expertise they have and the knowledge they have. And you kind of enhance what you're already doing face to face by putting that content out there that explains to people, hey, here's why you should use us. Here's why, as an independent agency, we think we can offer you something different. And here's why we can help you with all these things. And you kind of teach them a little about what you can do too, because a lot of people don't even understand independent agencies. They think, oh, you only do personal lines, or you only do commercial lines, or you only specialize in one thing. And so how can you tell them that in an interesting way without it being so, insurance jargon or so technical, to the point that they'll understand it and they'll be more interested in doing more with you?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think another overwhelming part of marketing, like I always see the memes on LinkedIn, Instagram, like all the different places that as a marketing person, like the CEO's son will say, oh, you should be on TikTok, or oh, you should be on some random channel. Like there's so many different channels out there. How do you choose where to start?
Yeah, it goes back to your audience and where are they at and who you're trying to reach.
Mm-hmm.
If you have an audience that trends younger, or you're in a major metro area, you probably do want to be on Instagram and maybe even TikTok. Maybe not dancing. We probably don't want to see that from a lot of insurance agents. But
you don't want to see insurance agents dance?
I mean, I've seen it at some conventions. It's not something I really want to film for TikTok. But I will say, if your audience is there, you should be there. And if whatever the culture of your agency is, you should portray that in your content. If you're kind of lighthearted and fun loving, and we've got some agents that we help do things with memes and stuff that's kind of trending online because it reflects who they are. If that's not who you are as an agent, don't do that because it's not authentic to who you are as an agency. But if you have an audience that trends older, or you're in a more rural area, you still want to be on Facebook. And I think everybody should be on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn just continues to grow, not just with an older generation. If you look at some of the numbers, Gen X and Gen Z and millennials, they love LinkedIn, and they're using it for not just job related things. It's for culture and growth related things and continuing education and professional development. So I think it's critical, and you just have to understand, where are the people I want to reach, and will this be a platform that can reach them? And you don't go overboard, with everything new that comes out. Because let's say you want to switch from Twitter and X right now because they're not as popular. There's things like Mastodon, there's things like Threads that Instagram runs. But is your audience utilizing that yet? If they're not, there's no rush other than to maybe grab your profile name and get your brand.
So, Daniel, you said something when you first started and said, agencies aren't really great at marketing. Some are, some aren't. And to be quite honest, when I value an agency, one of the first things I do is Google them. I look up their profile. I look to see where they are, what they're putting out there. I go to their website. I go to see if they have any reviews, because it tells me, are they driving business more than just referrals? And that for me will also help me understand what is the transferability of this agency? What is the future performance expectation of the agency? Do they have a presence that would attract more customers and actually keep some of their current customers? And I guess my question to you is, how do you overcome the fact that a lot of agents don't really embrace marketing? And I think it stems from, they don't really like to self-promote. I think it comes from a good place because it's uncomfortable to promote themselves. How do you overcome that when you're working with some agents?
We try to use something that I know you use a lot, which is data. And everybody's online, everybody's on social media. There are countless statistics out there about people starting their search for insurance online. And I get some pushback there because people will say, well, the people that buy from us don't buy their insurance online. Maybe they don't. They probably don't. But they do the research online, like you mentioned. Almost anybody that's working with a new business at least Googles them to see the reviews, like you mentioned, or to see what immediately pops up on Google. And if you're not controlling that, someone else is controlling the narrative. If you're not updating your website, if you're not introducing your team and talking about why you have expertise, then you're not showing people why they should work with you, other than, like you said, if it's a referral or a pre-existing relationship of some kind. But even referrals now, that includes online too, because people take Google reviews, even though they don't know the other person, they take them as if it's a personal recommendation. So you
Mhm.
have all this information out there that people are finding about you, and that's only trending up. There's not less people doing that, there's more people doing that. So you have to control that narrative, or you're not going to get in front of people with a message you want.
Well, you said this magic word, and now I just can't not ask you this question. Um, and honestly, I'm not a marketing expert by any stretch of the imagination. I figured it out pretty quick when I first started my business that number one, if you're not consistent, it's not going to work. And number two, if you're not good at it, it becomes work. And it is a difficult thing to be consistent at. Like it was taking a lot of time, a lot of energy. So I obviously outsourced it. Market Retrievers has been an incredible, incredible asset to me. I think from what, like month number 3 or 4 that I was in business, I was like, okay, I'm in over my head and I can't make this work. So I've got to figure this out. So if anybody out there knows me from social media, you can thank Daniel because he's been an incredible partner. But I guess my point is for me, I am data driven and I want to look at metrics and I want to know is what we're doing working? And sometimes probably to a fault. So I guess from your perspective, what data points should an agency be paying attention to know, am I moving the needle from a marketing perspective, or do I need to do something different?
Sure, there's a couple things we really point out to agents when we talk about this. And one of those is everybody thinks, I got to have a website. I have to have a website, and that's where people are going to find me. That's where our information should be updated all the time. That's where people will learn what we do. And so I typically ask anybody we're talking with, if you have a CPA or an attorney or another professional service you use, how many times do you go to their website per year? And most of them say, almost never. So why do you think insurance agency clients go to your website all the time just seeing what new bop you've got to offer? They don't. So when we show them the reach and the engagement of what you can do with social content and other content like blog posts, you're just getting so many more eyeballs on things. And then you can lead them to a call to action on your page, which also has to be really optimized for that kind of research. So you show them the data of where are people actually seeing you. So they're getting on Facebook or LinkedIn probably every day, really, if at least every week for most people. So if you're not in that feed, why would they ever go to your website on their own to look at anything? So that data is out there. And then they talk about things like, well, I want to educate my clients. I don't want to talk about people's anniversary of the agency or somebody's birthday. That's fine, except when people see the people content that you put out, that will then get you in their feed for you to show that educational content about insurance or talk about things they need to know for insurance. So on those insurance posts, you want to get reach, which is unique eyeballs onto things. But your engagement's going to come from people content. It's going to come from what you're doing in the community, how you're celebrating what your team does, the principals and owners and what they're doing and why people enjoy working with them. That's where you're actually going to get growth. And then you get eyeballs on those other posts because you've done that. It doesn't go the other way. You're sharing a carrier post about Access Umbrella. Who cares out there that's a consumer unless you're already working with them and they're like, oh, that's from Cindy and I love working with her. Let me see what she's talking about here because it's probably.
So you bring up a very interesting topic, which is actually the content that you're putting out influences the data points that are being driven. And I think the interesting part of that is recently we've definitely seen a rise in AI helping create content. And I've seen it go really, really good. And I've seen it go really, really bad. What's your experience been with using AI to create some of that content?
Yeah, we think it can be a real help if it is contributing and not controlling what you put out. So if you use a Chat GPT or a Jasper or some of these other AIs that allow you to kind of build content, they can help you with ideas and to generate a starting point. If you don't think you're a creative person, maybe you go to Chat GPT, and we've done this in a presentation we do, and you say, hey, what are 3 blog topics I could do about high net worth? and it will give you some ideas and say, hey, what if you talked about, property in a trust or LLC? But you should write that, because if you let the AI write it and you don't add yourself to it, not only is it not authentic to what you know and what you do, but Google specifically knows when you utilize AI and can downgrade your SEO if it thinks your content is all AI generated. Now, conveniently, they have their own Bard and probably don't downgrade that, but that's a whole nother subject. But
Never thought about
if
that.
you're utilizing it for your own content and not updating it, you could be a lot of trouble. You could be in some E&O trouble. For example, I had an agent that we work with write about restaurant insurance. And because the AI data at the time, if you use ChatGPT without a pro account, the data is not current. So let's say you go in there and you say, write about restaurant insurance. In this case, it talked about business interruption coverage and how that might come into play. Well, we know from the pandemic, that's not necessarily, number one, something you want to talk about, but number two, something that may hold true in their opinion of when that should happen. So that's something you want to be really careful with, or you can get yourself into some.
Yeah. I've seen where I've seen AI go really wrong is when it doesn't have that human connection, someone either editing it or writing it themselves and doing all those things, or when you're letting AI actually post for you without seeing it first. That's when I've seen it go really, really south. So, how are you utilizing AI to help generate content that's actually like, could you give a case study or like a little example of actually using it to help?
Yeah, so our team uses it more than me because I do have some insurance background and I'm licensed PNC. So the technical things I can typically at least understand this is correct, or I need to get more info here. But our team, when they're helping me write content, they will use some of the AI tools in our CRM or on Canva, and they'll generate some things, but we always double check them for the technical piece of it, because they want to write a caption about, inland marine, and of course they don't know anything about it. But if AI says, here's a cruise ship for your photo, I mean, you've got a problem. So they can start to build something with that content on AI. But we have to be in front of that piece, like you talked about, of, hey, just got to be careful what you're generating from this. But yes, we've utilized it for starting some blog ideas or some general things about, we've had agencies ask us about logos, and we'll say, what are some ideas for logo concepts based on these keywords they've told us? And at least it gives us a starting point of, okay, maybe we could utilize this image or this feature. So those are ways we've used it. I don't use it as much, but the team certainly.
So Daniel, if you were going to give any of your clients advice, let's say they haven't started marketing, they really are relying on inbound people finding them, whatever it is, and they want to start. What are the basics? What are the I got you need to know who your audience is and need to focus there. But what are the core things that every business should have? People ask me all the time, like from a financial standpoint, what things should you be looking at and what things should every single person know? So what's the marketing must-haves?
Sure, absolutely. So obviously you want them to have a brand, and hopefully their brand is consistent. And it's not just, and there's nothing wrong with using your name as your brand. But if it is just your name, is it branded in a way? Is it more than just letters that you put up, and it's not even really a logo, and it's not even really something associated with a brand? Because brands have value. And I mean, we can talk about that later too, about the value of agencies. But that's the place I'd start. Have a brand, be consistent with it. And then online, make sure your Google My Business profile is up to date with the right information, maybe some pictures of your agency that look nice, and not like one agency we saw where it was the dumpster outside their building, which at least it wasn't on fire. But it's better than just having nothing, I guess. But you want the building to look nice and like somebody would visit for a meeting. The address, you can publish content to your Google My Business profile. So if you have insurance coverage things you want to share it there, because that helps your SEO. So at least have that profile up to date. And then if nothing else, at least get your Facebook profile and LinkedIn profile and those other social platforms. At least get your brand name on there and update the logo and the graphics. so that there's a placeholder for hopefully when you get a chance to build more content out there. So yeah, make sure all those profiles are updated so people can at least find you and find the current information, because they're still seeing, map info and phone numbers, and this is the billboard of the modern day. So all those agencies that had billboards for years and years, you better have a billboard online.
Agreed. Agreed. So we have the must haves. What are the absolutely don't do's? You got any of those?
Um, I don't love sharing carrier content if that's all you do, because as independent agencies, it does not differentiate you from another independent agent. So there's nothing wrong with sharing that in your own way, but don't just set it up and forget it and say, okay, we'll just push out everything we get from this carrier. Make sure, number one, that it's something you actually want to promote. Maybe it's something you don't write as much business in. But number two, you want it branded to your agency. Your agency is the brand here. We've talked for years about, you want to have your own voice out there, and you're the agent, and the agents know their customers, and the customers think their agent is their carrier. So
For
don't
sure.
confuse them with a post from a company they've never heard of and say, oh, did they get bought out, or who is this they're promoting? So that'd be kind of my don't do. The other would just be, don't share things that might get you in trouble as far as E&O too, because I've seen some people say, oh, somebody from our team is just handling that. And they'll put out stuff that doesn't make any sense, or they'll say, oh, we've got the best comprehensive elite insurance ever that covers everything. Well, that's a big problem, as we all know. And Swiss Re's mind will explode, for example, if they're the ones that see that. So let's just make sure that you're representing yourself well, and that you're also putting out content that represents your brand specific.
Yeah, I totally get that. And, when you were talking about, a brand with your name, there's a big, big, big debate about last name agencies versus agencies that have unique names. Let's just call it that. What is your thought process on that? Like, do you have a opinion on last name agencies versus not? Because when I first started out, this, um, you know, not the most well thought out thing I've ever done in my life, but I asked a ton of people when I was getting ready to start, what agency or what name should I use? And my first logo actually had my full name inside of it. It's not there now, but and the thought process was you have some name recognition, therefore you should use your name and you should whatever. I think there's a lot of people that feel that way. I chose to take it out because I value businesses and I want it to be transferable at some point in time in the future. If I ever want to do this, I don't want people to think agency focus is just Carey Wallace. I don't know that I'm accomplished that quite yet, but I'm working on it. And it's really hard to do when your full name is actually in the thing. So what do you think about last name agencies and transferability?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of these have been around for plus years, or at least 50 plus years. And at that time, it made a lot of sense because people knew you in the town or community you worked in. And you probably weren't sitting there thinking, oh, I'm going to be licensed in 50 states. And, 50 years from now, we're going to be wanting to sell this agency. You were thinking, I'll pass this down to my children or future generations. And so the name made perfect sense. I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as the branding is strong enough to live on its own. And we have an agent client that has a name that is not theirs, that's on the agency, because the family had purchased it and kept the name. And they get calls all the time saying, can I speak to so and so, who isn't even a real person at this point? So you have to be careful with that. But they have a brand now that complements that name that is strong. And at some point, if they said, okay, we'll carry this branding over because the branding doesn't include the name itself, then people will recognize it and say, oh, okay, that's still the same agency, but the name has changed. So if you're going to have a named agency, at least have a complementing brand that's very strong for it. And if you're not going to have a named agency, just make sure that it's representative of what people will expect from you. So, there was a big trend, obviously, with things like Lemonade and things like that, where you're like, what does that even mean? What does that have to do with insurance? Well, that may be the same thing you could apply to an agency. At least give them some sense of, okay, this is a thing that will provide security or support or help with risk management, whatever it is, something in that branding that ties to the service you provide. So I think there's value in both, Carrie, but there's certainly differences in how you have to.
Yeah. It's funny because I think of lemonade and now I know, obviously, but how crazy. Like, who was sitting in a room and actually was like, it's online insurance. I know, let's call it lemonade. Like, what in the world? I must be the least creative person on the planet because my brain would never go there. That's for sure. It's
Yeah.
just kind of nuts.
Well, you've probably both seen there's a restaurant name generator online
Mhm.
Oh,
because
yeah.
for so long it was like, what are you gonna name your restaurant? Oh, Salt and Ginger, and you use these two specific names and just pulled them out of a hat, kind of. And that seems like for a while what every tech company was doing. And there's nothing wrong with that in some cases, but there better be a story and a brand around it that ties into why you named it that. So I just think that's the key thing. If you're going to name it something that's a little more unique like that, you better have a good story of why you did it.
Well, and I think the story is what people connect to, and that's how the relationship really starts. And things like your logo, your colors, your website, your social media, your presence on Google Business, your reviews, all of those things tie into that relationship. One of the things that comes up in my world a lot is like putting carrier logos on your website. When I think of a brand and how I interact with a brand that I'm controlling is often, how do I defend my brand? How do I keep my brand intact and keep things away that might infringe on the brand or be different? And like you said earlier, a lot of end insureds, they think that the carrier is their insurance agent. They don't understand the difference between an independent insurance agent and the carrier, because that relationship, it's different than the normal
Yeah.
consumer, than a normal transaction that you do. So how do you think that social, like posting regularly and doing all these things we've talked about, can help build relationships?
So I think it's part of tell them why they'd be comfortable working with you. Tell them why they should trust you, why you bring something different to the table. And for a lot of agents, if you ask them what they do that's different from other agencies, they'll tell you customer service. Well, that's kind of the baseline, right? If you're not good at customer service, what are you doing in a service business?
Right.
So it's more about the experience, the people, the knowledge they have. And then for a lot of agents, it's also about how big they are in their communities as far as helping organizations, helping businesses in their communities, and that role they have as being a part of that community. So when you're building content, play to your strengths of, okay, our team is really involved in this community. We're really involved in the business world in this community we live in. Talk about that, and don't do it in a bragging way because that's some of the concern, like we talked.
Yeah.
Just say how honored and glad you are that you're able to do these things. We've been successful, so we're able to support this charity. We've been pleased that we've had so many clients trust us. So we're so glad that we're involved in the local chamber. Talk about those things, and it's not bragging. It is just saying what you're doing and enhancing the relationships you have. And people build that trust sometimes first online at this point. You don't have time to talk to everybody. The amount of people going to local civic groups and things is down. So where are you going to reach them if you're not networking online with people you don't already know?
One of the best speakers I heard this year as I was out speaking and listening to other people was Christos. And he has a speech that is, what do you sell? And honestly, you can ask my husband who's been in sales forever and ever, and I've been in finance. Like, so I actually don't view myself as a salesperson, haven't forever. I do now. I own my own business, so obviously I get, in order to run a business you have to sell. But I really didn't. And that's why I think his speech, really, I connected to it, because you don't sell a thing, you don't sell a service, you sell a feeling of some sort. So use Disney as an example. And Disney is happiness, obviously. That's the happiest place on earth, right? That's what they're trying to sell. I think if people ask themselves, who's my target customer and what do I actually sell? It makes it easier to talk about what you're doing and not make it feel like it's self-promoting, right? So it's a kind of a little bit of a switch, because for people like me that I just don't feel like it's sales. I feel like I can provide something that makes it easier, clear, and gives options. And I uncomplicate something that could be very, very complicated or very overwhelming. That's something that's easier to talk about than EBITDA. Like, don't get me wrong, I talk about EBITDA too. But, you know, if you think about it though, we have to, and insurance is a complicated thing, and it's also very intangible. So think about, what do you provide? And it's your expertise that puts them in a better place than what they'd be without you. So anyway, I think you just have to think about it differently, and then marketing comes a whole lot easier, right? And you need someone that can help you get from A to B and think about it differently, which I'm not the best at, but it certainly was helpful to hear him say that.
And I think so, Carrie. I think one thing I think are so good at is telling them something that they're going to be interested in. And you don't do it intentionally, I don't think, but you ask a question like, is the value of your agency important? Who would say no to that? Hopefully. I mean, hopefully there's not any agents out there that say, I'm not worried about it. I'm sure there are, but you know,
Yeah.
to
Yeah, I
your
get it.
point though, you have that expertise and you ask that question in a certain way and they're going to want to talk to you.
Yeah. So tell me, what's the story behind Market Retrievers? I mean, you were inside an association, you were doing marketing, you decided to step out on your own. How in the world did you get to Market Retrievers?
So we kind of had this idea of fetch your targets. And we talked about target audience. We talked about how important that is. How can you go reach that target audience and bring them back for business? Because marketing is kind of about creating demand. So, how can you do that? How can you develop demand from your audience? You have to go retrieve them where they're at. So, we said, most people love dogs. I've got some dog stuff behind me here, as you can probably see, but we said, okay, visually that made sense to us of how can you retrieve that audience? It's your market, and let's do market retrievers for that kind of branding and logo. And we loved using Fetch. Mean Girls is big again, and that was the trying to make Fetch happen. So we've got those stickers and everything. But yes, that's kind of where we got that branding from and how we developed our own kind of value statement of doing it.
Yeah, and it's simple and people relate to it. And also, I love some of the things you guys put out there. Who doesn't love looking at a dog? Who doesn't love looking at people that are happy? Who doesn't love, I mean, if you think about it, it doesn't have to be crazy complicated. If you put, everything insurance in that thing, I don't know that I would pay attention. Like, it's not going to attract people, but you did something that does attract people, which is pretty cool.
I appreciate that. I think also you do have to be as simple as you can and straightforward as you can. And talking about branding earlier, what's going to resonate quickly with someone as to what you do? Your name is very straightforward. You're helping them focus on what they do with their agency and how they do it. That's the kind of story you want to tell somebody in a quick, I don't even call it an elevator speech now. You've got a couple seconds to basically tell somebody before they stop paying attention to you. So you better hope you have some kind of message.
So I can't help but, before we go, you do have a thing behind you that I love. You have a quote that says, "You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall." One of my favorite movies, by the way, and it's something my stepmother says on a regular basis, which is hilarious. So, dude, I don't know why that's there, but I'm loving that it's there. Yeah.
Well, that's from our dog. So
Oh,
and
really?
it's his name's Drago. It's Ivan Drago, like from Rocky Four. His middle name's Drago, but he goes by that. And we give him a personality like most crazy dog owners do, of course. That
That's
just fits his
awesome.
personality.
Oh my
That
goodness.
is fantastic. I love it.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Daniel. I think this has been a really productive conversation. I hope a lot of agency owners who listen to this, it changes their mind or gives them some ideas about marketing. I really hope it does, because it definitely gave me some ideas. So I appreciate you joining us and hope to see you soon.
Yeah. If people want to reach out to you, Daniel, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, just check out marketretrievers.com or obviously follow us on social media. We do have a few TikToks out there if you're really into that, but I don't know what kind of data China's got from us, but it's out there somewhere. So.
Well, now I'm going to look it up. So absolutely. That's great. Well, thanks so much for
Thank
coming
you
on.
both.
And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Absolutely.